before the end. There's that recording alert. Hoping to have that action alert ready for you by the end of this meeting today. So we're going to share a little bit more about that information. It's probably some stuff you've heard about if you've been following some of the Seattle City Council work and decisions around parks. So more to come on that. Alexis Mercedes Rink is going to join us again from KCRHA and give us a little bit of update on where they are with the 5-year planning, what that's looking like, how community feedback has been incorporated either into the 5-year plan or in other work of the RHA, and then how you can continue to be involved in that work and the progress towards those strategic goals. Melody Garcia from BDS Planning is going to be here to talk about homeless provider stipends. So we've got a lot of information to share with you on that big and important news. Related to that, this is really in line with a lot of the work the coalition has been doing for a while, and we are, really kind of have like a formal campaign of essential workers that involves the trauma homeless provider trauma survey. It's this homeless provider stipend, it's budget work, it's inflation work. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and then hopefully we'll have some time for member announcements, although we're not always the most consistent on that part, but we should have some time. On that note, Sarah, if you will change the slide, and if I could invite someone to read our mission.
We mobilize our community to challenge systemic causes of homelessness and advocate for housing justice.
Thank you, Barbara. Appreciate that. We like to have that moment and have somebody read it out. These meetings are not just about information sharing, although that's a huge piece of it. It is us building community. It is us building collective action. And we have missed you all. I mean, we needed the good break in August for some internal work and to do a lot of work. I think a lot of folks also needed that. I hope you were able to take a break and have a pause at some point in the summer, but we are really excited to be back with you all in community doing this amazing work. One of the things that we were working on over the summer is we have hired on a 5th staff member. Tim Marshall is joining us. He is our member connector and program coordinator. So hopefully over the next couple weeks and months, you're going to get to know and meet him more. He and I are going to be really working to connect with members and community and invite you all into this work in deeper ways now that we've got another person dedicated to this. So Tim, if you would love to introduce yourself to our community, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jody. I will try to keep this brief so we can get back to an important jam-packed agenda. My name is Tim. I use he, him pronouns. I'm from Burien, but I've lived in the Seattle area most of my adult life. I have a background in public policy, public administration, and advocacy. I have experienced homelessness and housing instability as a youth and young adult, so I'm pretty passionate to have an opportunity to do some work with folks who serve those people who are currently experiencing those challenges. It is a pleasure to be here today to, serve service providers and all that you do. We really appreciate you. And I'm gonna pass it back to Jody now. Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Tim. We are really excited to have you here and be a part of the team. And thank you for taking a little time to introduce yourself to the group. And I am just going to major shout out to Rachel, who just brought me a cup of coffee and cream. Mwah! That is teamwork, folks. That is community care. That's what we're here to do. Oh, okay. I'm going to pass it over to our fearless leader, Allison, to do a little bit of a talk about this action alert and a little bit of information so you can, have some context and get grounded into that. And then we'll be able to share that out later. So Allison, take the floor, please.
Thank you very much. It is wonderful to see people. For those who might have joined after Jody said this, I'll just reiterate, it is not our preference to be seeing each other in little boxes over Zoom. It is our preference to be together in person. The history of this coalition for over 40 years has been to provide good coffee with or without cream for everybody. And so we try to replicate the effect of that by inviting all of you to turn on your cameras if you wish, share your name, your preferred pronouns, your organizational affiliation, if any, with us. Do that in the chat if you wish. And way to go, Rachel. Welcome, Tam. We're really delighted to have you join the coalition's small and mighty team. And as I think everyone who knows the coalition knows, the reason that this small group of paid staff can do what we do to advance our mission, vision, and values is because we are truly a coalition. You all are the folks who bring information to and from these meetings. You're the folks who inform advocacy and action with the reality on the ground. And we're always grateful when you give us information about what's useful to you or what you or the folks you're working with need, and when you invite other people to join our meetings. So we generally have a principle. We not only want to share information that's valuable so that it's worth your time to come to these meetings, virtually or in person, but also to take action. Collective action is one of the values of this coalition. However, we're not completely ready with the action alert link, so I'm just going to describe the action for today to you, and we'll bring you the link a little bit later in the meeting. Those of you who are in and around Seattle may be aware that one of the ways that the city of Seattle chose some years ago to fund work in the Seattle parks, which are a beautiful treasure of the city, is through creating a parks district. It is a fairly peculiar process. The district is governed by a group that is separate from, but actually the same people as, the Seattle City Council. So what is under discussion now, and what I'm going to put into the chat now, is Erica C. Barnett's Publicola article about the mayor's proposal to double the Parks District funding, which is an informative document for you to read. What's under discussion now is increasing funding, which will not go to a vote of the people. It will be acted on by the city council. And we, of course, support increased funding for public shared spaces, which we all need and value and benefit from. What we do not support is the attempt to create 29 FTE positions that will essentially be dedicated to sweeping people who are too poor to have homes out of shared public spaces. We believe that it is far more important to ensure that we have open, clean, functioning public restrooms in our parks, that the water fountains work, that there is regular garbage pickup, and that people actually do have the ability to use the space, rich or poor. So we have an action alert to allow you to express that opinion. And as always, you can edit the action alert to reflect your own position. What I would suggest is that if you are a Seattle resident and a voter, that you put that in your message. If you are somebody who visits Seattle but don't live in Seattle, you should put that in your message. It is a short timeline. It is actually a little bit vague what the timeline is, but I would say within the next several days to week, there will probably be a vote. But a vote on what? That also remains to be seen. The mayor has put forward a proposal. There is a Parks District board that has recommended other things, some of which are in the mayor's proposal, some of which are not. And then City Council member Andrew Lewis will be putting forward a third version. So there will be discussion, there will be debate, and we are not saying that this increased revenue for our parks should not happen. We are specifically saying what we think public money should be used to do for the public benefit. So I think I will leave it there. If you have questions, other information or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. We want to give a huge shout out to some of the mutual aid groups, particularly Stop the Sweeps, that have their own sign-on letter going on this topic. And there are other organizations also that are alerted to the fact that this is really an attempt to, in some ways, insert policing into the parks, which is not an appropriate thing to do. So I will hand things back to Jody, take a look at the chat, and I'll probably go off camera for a bit to work on another late breaking issue. Thank you.
Thanks, Allison. So more to come on that. We will actively be working on getting that link up for you all to take action and to share out with your colleagues and your community. So moving right along, I am really happy to welcome Alexis Mercedes Rink back from the KCRHA. We, as I mentioned before, didn't have a meeting in August, but back in July, Alexis and Marshall were here really talking about some of the components that were going into the 5-year planning. There was a lot of community engagement sessions that were happening. They were building on other good work that has happened previously in this community and what the RHA has heard in their engagements with community over the past year of them really getting up and running. And so she is back to share out a little bit more of what has come from all of that. So I will welcome and appreciate Alexis being here to share out. Thanks, Alexis.
Thanks for having me back. Hi, everybody. My name is Alexis Mercedes Rink. I use she, her pronouns, and really excited to come back and talk to you all about the progress that has been made on the 5-year plan, but also to reflect back what we heard loud and clear from this group, and talk a little bit more about how we're building on what communities clearly stated as priorities as that need to be represented in the plan. And so I'm going to take us through a little presentation to talk about that and then discuss how we're going to build on that work. But I wanted to take a moment to celebrate a win very, very quickly, because we don't always get to do that. I wanted to present to you all some updated information about the Emergency Housing Voucher Program. This was a resource made available through the American Rescue Plan. King County had an allocation of 1,314 vouchers, which allow for 10 years of housing affordability. And as of last week, we've had 1,000 households permanently housed using those vouchers. Just in the past year, which is just a moment to celebrate as a community, and also want to just express tremendous gratitude to the provider organizations who were the ones who made this possible, truly, as they worked in identifying folks to receive vouchers and then walked alongside them as they went through what at times can be a really complicated process of working through with our housing authority partners and then helping folks successfully lease up using the voucher. And so through a lot of strong community partnerships, we were able to really lead in the country in terms of lease ups and being able to effectively use this resource. Our national average right now is actually at 44% lease ups, and we are at 76% lease ups, successful lease ups. So it's really exciting. When we look at our peer continuum of cares, which would be LA, San Francisco, New York, the lease up rate is actually at 24%. And so wanting to just take a moment to bring forward that little bit of information for you all, that we have a bit to celebrate, because now we have 1,000 households that have been permanently housed using this resource. And that's just something I think we all want to take a moment to celebrate. And so with that, I'm going to move us to talking about the 5-year plan. And so as Jody had stated, we are working on a lot of community work that has been done over the years. And so building on the fact that we had the regional action framework, which was a very community-based effort that I'm sure folks who are on the call today were a part of, wanting to build on and honor the work that was done there, while also looking to specific subpopulation reports, such as the Youth and Young Adult CARDIA report that was done, the Ingersoll report, which focused on needs of LGBTQ folks who are accessing homelessness services. We have a year of engagement under our belts and have been mindfully collecting our notes and feedback, while also tapping into our base building spaces, which are spaces where our team is working and having focused conversations on specific program types with providers. We have the National Innovation Service report, we have vehicle residency in our high acuity work group, and we ran 40 workshops in July. And so at this point, we've heard a lot. We've heard a lot, and we've heard some clear priorities come out of all of those sessions. But I wanted to uplift that point to say we're not starting from zero. In fact, what we are now really well positioned to do is to get really focused about what are we actually going to do in the next 5 years in service of addressing community needs. And so wanted to reflect back and summarize what we heard in particular from this group in July. We had a session really focused on talking about specific program types and what does success look like for folks who are accessing services, and what does success look like for providers who are providing that service. And so in our focused part of the workshop on shelter, this group expressed that success for folks accessing shelter services, that can look like having autonomy, privacy, accessibility options, not having artificial timelines, and being able to have a sense of community while accessing that service. When we looked at success for providers, it looked like compensation for providers, adequate staffing and leadership development paired with capacity building. When we talked about what outreach looks like, we discussed how success for folks who are receiving outreach, feeling acceptance, being met where they are, having consistency, clear and supported pathways to other systems and services, while then having also reliable relationships. And success for our outreach folks, providers, looking like the ability to build relationships and address health needs. Health needs was something that was really elevated in that conversation, while also having available housing to actually refer individuals to. And the third area we discussed, we talked about our permanent supportive housing for folks who are accessing permanent supportive housing residents. That success really looks like easy access to additional resources, having choice, seeing physical health improvements, while also reporting feeling safe and having a clean space. And success for our provider community, the ability to offer consistent supportive services, sufficient staffing, and the ability to match people to the housing model that best suits their needs. And so those were the things that we've heard, which might make you think, where are we incorporating that into our work? And I would describe how that feedback is moving forward in two primary ways. First, a lot of this feedback is really helpful as we're looking to do program redesign for reprocurement, as we're going to be reprocuring the system in 2023. So you'll likely see those elements incorporated as we begin to RFP by program type. Additionally, the priorities that were expressed in what we just walked through, you'll likely see presented in the priorities in the 5-year plan. And so just wanted to reflect, those are kind of the two pathways that that feedback is being honored and moving forward. And so as I go into more about the 5-year plan, I want to ground us in kind of the paradigm we're operating in as we are developing elements of the plan. So we are committed to acting through our theory of change, which is if we create a homelessness response system that centers the voices of those who have lived experience of homelessness, then we'll be able to focus on responding to needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. And so paired with that, and for everyone's also awareness, our interlocal agreement requires us to lead with a racial equity lens and to utilize an equitable decision-making framework. And so wanted to take a moment just to ground us in that, those key elements, particularly as we are going to be really looking towards them as we're developing the further parts of the 5-year plan. And so I think you'll see that commitment reflected in what's ultimately developed and what we're talking about today. So what is the 5-year plan actually going to look like? What can you expect to just really look like? Pardon me, my caffeine's still kicking in. opted for an energy drink instead of coffee today. So taking us to what the framework of the plan will look like. At this point, let's see, we are structuring our vision and strategies through the following framework. We have system goals, which are tied to objectives. Objectives will have initiatives, and initiatives have supporting activities. Our system goals, what's our vision for the next 5 years? And our objectives are, what are the things that we need to accomplish in the next 5 years in service of working towards those goals? Our initiatives, how are we actually going to go about achieving those objectives? So it really describes our strategic process. And then activities are the specific actions tied to those initiatives that'll help us make progress. And that activities level will be really informative to how we do work planning over the next 5 years. So we can really plan effectively and be able to ensure that we're not biting off more than we can chew and just be responsible stewards of the goals that we're laying out in this plan. And so to color this framework with a little bit of a cheesy example, and because I'm in the back to school spirit, if my goal is to become the valedictorian, my objective is to get a 4.0 this semester. I'll have 2 initiatives. The first, I'm going to start a study group for AP Calculus because I'm not the best at math. And some supporting activities look like creating a topic schedule for the study group over the course of the year. I'm going to send out a doodle poll to schedule out all of our meetings. I'll have another initiative. I'm going to sleep at least 8 hours a night, which would be a dream. And I'll turn off my phone by 9 o'clock to do that. And I'll switch from coffee to tea. So been funny given how much caffeine has been a point of conversation in today's session already. So that kind of goofy example is to really just color what we're talking about when we mean by this framework. And with that, I'm going to take us into what our proposed system goals are. So the proposed system goals that we are discussing, we are putting forward 6. Our implementation board actually just reviewed these yesterday and gave us a unanimous thumbs up that these feel right, and would also uplift that these continue to be aligned with what we're hearing from community partners. And so I'm going to do a quick walkthrough of these proposed system goals, and then go a little bit more in detail in terms of how we landed on them as a proposed system goal and what are some of the draft objectives and identified needs to develop, the draft objectives and how we're moving towards further developing the objectives and activities associated with these goals. So to do a quick summary, our proposed system goals are 1, to expand our capacity for services, 2, to significantly reduce unsheltered homelessness, 3, ending homelessness for unaccompanied youth and young adults, 4, ending unsheltered homelessness for families and children in King County, 5, reducing racial disproportionalities in unsheltered homelessness, and 6, consolidating our homelessness response system and improving system accountability to folks experiencing homelessness. And so how we landed on each of these, starting with expanding capacity for services. This was identified as a longer term priority in the regional action framework. It should also be uplifted that the regional action framework was just finishing up its work as the pandemic was beginning, and in many ways serves as a pre-pandemic document, and a lot has changed since then. If there's anything that we've heard across the board as an agency is the need to expand services. Expanding services and further tied to that first draft objective, you can see stabilizing our workforce is a huge part of that, being able to do that. And so some of the draft objectives that we've laid forth for consideration include stabilizing our workforce, increasing federal funding for services, increasing state and local funding for services, standardizing person-centered healing-based services, increasing capacity building supports for agencies positioned to provide culturally responsive care. And by culturally responsive care, we mean including but not limited to LGBTQIA organizations, particularly those that can suit the needs of trans folks. With that, also immigrant and refugee organizations and other by and for agencies. And the last area, looking at developing our capacity for a severe weather emergency that meets the needs of folks experiencing homelessness. We just went through a smoke event. We are finding as an agency that we're continually needing to position to meet needs of folks who are outside as a system. And so as we are seeing increasing rates, I think even just in the first year of operations, we've had 7 severe weather incidents, from snow to extreme cold to heat wave to smoke events. Being able to position and address needs when these weather conditions come up is just becoming increasingly apparent. And so we've put that forward as a draft objective for us. Taking us to our goal to significantly reduce unsheltered homelessness. I think that's a goal we can all get behind. It's an interim goal identified by the Regional Action Framework, and the draft objectives tied to this. That first draft objective is around expanding housing to meet the need. Again, across the board, we need housing. That is something this community has said loud and clear, and something we know to be true. And what I would uplift for this draft objective is that we have a number of some modeling work that's coming out that I'll talk about in a little bit, but we are working with a firm to do some specific modeling on specifically how much of each of these housing types would we need and what are the costs associated with expanding to really meet the gap. So there will be some numbers plugged into this piece, and paired with that, we also have the Partnership for Zero work coming under draft objectives here. And then you'll notice the rest of this section has kind of placeholders. So you'll see high acuity population objective, vehicle resident objective, seniors, veterans, and other subpopulations. We have done some pretty robust engagement with our community partners who work with these communities, but we're at a point where we've identified that we need to set an objective around meeting the needs of those communities, but we're not in a place at this time to make that decision. We want to work more closely with our community partners who are supporting these subpopulations, which is really the next tranche now. We're going to be reaching out, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, and we'll be talking about this at the end, but that's the next big stage of development, is actually working with our community partners who are really supporting these specific subpopulations to ensure that we're actually hitting the mark and doing what needs to be done. And so again, getting a little bit ahead of myself, but want to uplift. This is the next big area for development, and we want it to be as community driven as possible. Taking us to the next area, ending unsheltered homelessness for families and children in King County. Similarly, we'll be working closely with our family provider community, as well as looking towards expanding and working with families who have lived experience of homelessness as well to further identify draft objectives here. And would also uplift, as folks may see, this is a interim goal that was also identified by the Regional Action Framework. And similarly to this area, when we look at ending homelessness for unaccompanied youth and young adults, we have also uplifted this as an interim goal identified by the Regional Action Framework. And further, we are looking at a specific set of objectives to support working towards this goal. Taking us to our last 2 areas, would want to uplift that reducing racial disproportionalities and unsheltered homelessness is something that we continue to work. We're continuing to work on in everything that we do, but wanting to set some specific objectives around what that looks like, so how we can evaluate our success in meeting that. And also want to uplift, it's been clearly articulated the need to have strategy around addressing the needs of immigrant and refugee communities who are experiencing homelessness. That's something that has been elevated by community partners strongly over the past year. And we have, in response to that, want to be very clear-eyed and ensure that we're setting some objectives that really support the needs of those communities. And in the last area, we're looking at further consolidating our homelessness response system and improving system accountability to folks experiencing homelessness. And so this is the system goal area where we are really focused on strengthening partnership and alignment with other systems. So thinking about our healthcare system, employment, workforce, courts, prisons, behavioral health. This is where we're going to be working with our system partners to improve our system relationships. Paired with that, we're looking at further consolidating and streamlining funding avenues. As a reminder, our whole agency was designed to consolidate homelessness response, and so there's still some steps that we can take to improve consolidation and coordination, and so that's really the spirit of this system goal. And so taking us to what the timeline of development looks like, we are working right now in September. Our implementation board has been officially briefed in and has given their support. The governing committee will receive this almost exact presentation today at 11 o'clock. And so taking us to just what happens next, we have some content to develop. There's still a lot of room for initiatives to be developed, as well as looking at objectives. And so I'm wanting to invite you all to be a part of that process and have some focused work groups in October to work on those topic areas. And so as a reminder, we are looking at completion and approval of the 5-year plan slated for December. And so it's coming up quick, but we're of the mind that we want to pull together some final working groups to really be clear about what needs to be developed in order to actually best meet the needs of our communities. And so we want to invite you all to be a part of that. So I'm going to be dropping a link in the chat shortly. We are going to be convening some specific working groups focused on topic areas. And I think you saw some of the topic areas outlined in those objectives. And so inviting you all to be a part of some of the content matter experts to be shaping those objectives and initiatives. And so what can you expect if you sign up and fill out the Smart Sheet and give us your information? We'll be reaching out if you do decide to be a part of one of these working groups. The commitment really looks like 2 to 3 sessions, an hour each in October. We will be bringing forward some proposals and ideas based on, again, a lot of community feedback, and the role of that work group is to refine, edit, change, and prioritize among some proposed objectives and initiatives that will ultimately be included in the plan. And I think that about wraps up my presentation. I'm fearful I've talked way too much, and I'm stopping sharing my screen and seeing that there's so much in the chat that I missed. I'm sorry.
No. I've been tracking it, Alexis. That was wonderful. One cannot be expected to do it all. So there are a few different questions / comments coming in kind of related to housing vouchers, comment about youth homelessness, and then specifically to some other aspects. So I might just take them in order so as I don't actually miss anything, although that may not be the most cohesive way to do it. So apologies to folks, but kind of going back to the beginning, we've got question about how do families access the emergency vouchers. And then another question is that, that's awesome about how well we've done, but what happens to the 24% of the vouchers that have not yet been used to permanently house families? So I'll give you a chance to reply to those too.
Fantastic question. So families so right now vouchers are accessed through service providers. We had gone through our process of doing an allocating a set amount to homelessness service providers around the region. And that process took place about a year ago. And so the primary way to access vouchers is directly through service providers. And happy to invite other service providers who may be on the line and have worked on EHVs to chime in on that piece. But taking to the next question, looking at the 24% of vouchers that have not been used to permanently house folks yet. So great question. There is a deadline for the vouchers, and it's about a year from now. So we're actually making very good progress to help support those additional 24% of the vouchers that have not been successfully leased up yet. To that end, I know there is, we'll be working towards ensuring that it's fully utilized. It's my understanding that if there are any vouchers that are not utilized after a year, we might lose the ability to use them. And so we'll be really focused on ensuring that everybody's able to fully tap into the resource. But we have a year, so we're in a pretty good position on that point.
Great, thank you for that. Allie was asking if the equity-based decision-making framework might be shared.
Yeah, we have a couple of tools that we can share. So I can share our equity framework as a follow-up. And then we also use an anti-racist strategy chart process when looking at decisions. I'm happy to share that as well. It's a really helpful tool for actually thinking about how to go about a project.
Wonderful. Well, if you are able to share that with us, we can include that in our kind of follow-up blog that'll go out to everybody in our follow-up. So that's great. And then there was just, I think, some comments about ADA compliant and compliance, and highlighting just the fact that, you know, there are some apartments that are not ADA compliant, can't or won't make those improvements, and sort of thinking about that. And I don't know if there was more of a comment highlighting, or if Belle, if you want to come off and elaborate on your thoughts.
What I meant
okay.
by that is, since you are working with disability and disability housing, it would be nice to incorporate more issues and services around such things as getting to the trash compactors or the garbage areas that are on such a steep incline that the people that are mobility impaired, like walkers, caned, blind, wheelchairs, etc., or have a stroller in tow carrying trash, trying to get it to those places. And there is such a incline that they cannot get to them. They can't hold on to a child, the wheelchair, drive it, and try to get up a curve that is basically 3-4 inches, 2 inches high, without destroying their chair, tipping backwards because the wheels turn, or endangering their safety in some way. And if they try to get out of their chair, they can fall, and other issues like that. It's something that needs to be incorporated to future plans for housing, and also something that tenants need in their rights. Because if they choose not to make these changes, they don't have to. And that leaves the tenants vulnerable. If you argue it, you're black marked. If you argue, you can lose your home. But then if the trash piles up and then you have other issues around that, then that becomes an issue of targeting so that they can eliminate. Where is the balance?
Well, I will give you a chance to respond here, Alexis, but Belle, I want to thank you for raising that. I think it's probably a little bit outside the purview of the RHA,
We
but
do need to take it farther, but I wanted somebody to know a thought lost, a right pushed off to the garbage can does not get changed.
yes, no, I think your point is well taken and well heard, and this community needs to be raising those things up in collective voice. So I really appreciate that. And Alexis, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
I think just gratitude also for raising this point specifically, because I know also within our team, we're trying to work on ways to just have a stronger accessibility and like ableism lens, and understanding how ableism is really impacting our folks who are accessing services, and looking at ways that we can really actually lean into going beyond just what does it mean to be ADA compliant, but what does it actually mean to be radically inclusive and supportive of folks living with disabilities. And so exploring programmatic changes that we can do to do just that. So I think I'd respond by just saying we're actually really trying to work with our disability justice partners to develop what are the things we need to do to best support, because we are seeing such a large percentage of our folks, our community who is experiencing unsheltered homelessness in particular, also living with disabilities.
Yeah, we need to stop killing grandma, you know, grandpa's included with that. And people that have MS or other issues like that don't deserve to be put into the category for something that happened to them that they did not bring onto themselves. It's not their fault.
Thank you so much, Belle. Really appreciate that. I'm going to move us on to some more comments, but keep throwing stuff in the chat. We will get to them one way or another. So does KCRHA provide continuity of support for service agencies, for example, helping to put a plan in place, providing resources and support to service agencies related to emergency preparedness or response to an emergency?
Great question. I think that's a dream. We have a team within our programs division known as the Community Capacity Team that works on all elements of capacity building, from assisting smaller agencies with with billing and kind of technical support around, getting involved in understanding grants processes. But I think that's also really the vision around building out support and being able to support agencies in emergency preparedness as our severe weather response and knowledge base is kind of ramping up. I know that team has been working with agencies to talk through what does it mean to be prepared for an emergency. And so that's kind of the plan specifically, and that would be the team that will be spearheading that.
Great. And then is the RHA in the process of applying for the HUD fiscal year 2022 COC funding for youth homelessness?
I believe so. But let me get back to you on that. I believe so, but I'm only about 90% sure on that one. So let me circle back on that point.
We appreciate you, Alexis. We know you as knowledgeable and as many hats as you wear over there. You may not have actually all of those answers at your fingertips. So we appreciate that. We'll include that in our email back to folks. And then wanted to read out loud Allison's comment of just, I appreciate you're bringing this draft synthesis and system goals back to our membership as key informants and partners. Having been deeply involved in multiple efforts to set goals and objectives and bolster the capacity to meet them, I want to offer something that I think the KCRHA has to engage in further community conversation about, which is namely that it is problematic to set population-specific goals to end unsheltered homelessness for some groups and not all. So the vast majority of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness are adults. We have a history in this community from the 10-year plan and Committee to End Homelessness through All Home of not recognizing that truth and of not grappling with the implications of dividing people experiencing homelessness into different groupings or categories, some of whom may be seen as more deserving or desirable than others. And this feeds into all kinds of issues, including the problems of siting services. And as always, we are happy to discuss, but wanted to flag that today. So.
To just reflect back and understanding, yes, there's absolutely challenges with what happened, like when we decide to, the deservedness argument. What we've tried to do in this structure is try and honor what had been stated in the regional action framework. Particularly, there had been a set number of interim goals so these were set as 3 to 5 year goals. And so wanting to honor what had been laid out in that plan since that had been stated as community's priorities during the last planning process, while then also trying to integrate the requirements of our interlocal agreement, which do require some population-specific strategies. So we're legally required, unfortunately, to be setting forward strategies, but what we are attempting to do in that objective level is try and capture everybody. So trying to, and want to also at this point, be clear that that objective level is not fully baked. And if there are core things that are missing from that level, would love to hear, because we do want to be able to capture all folks, particularly when it comes to our single adult communities who are experiencing homelessness.
Great. Thank you for kind of reflecting back some of what Allison is sharing and offering and some of the legal constraints that you all have, and it sounds like it's a wonderful opportunity for us to engage further. We've got 2 more comments, and then I'm gonna move us on to our next section, because our speaker Melody is here, but Karina put in the chat that the public housing authorities are no longer able to issue more of the EHV, so providers can't refer more folks. So just wanted to put that out there, and we can maybe Alexis, if it's not you, just we can follow up and make sure we've got some good resources for folks to learn more about the EHVs, because that is clearly a point of interest here, as Tina is asking, will PSH get more EHVs to support the move on strategy? So I am going to close us out here just because I do want to move us on and keep us on our agenda. But I will commit to you all to connecting with Alexis and appropriate other folks to get some more EHV information for folks. So Okay, thank you, Alexis. Really appreciate you being back here, sharing, hearing thoughts, things that are getting highlighted, places where we continue to, dive in deeply with each other. So much appreciated, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. On that note, I am going to hand it over to my colleague, Sarah, to introduce our next guest speaker. So Sarah, please take the floor.
Hi, everybody. So our next presentation today is on the homeless worker stipends. And we have Melody here from BDS Consulting. I just want to give a little bit of context around these particular stipends. So last legislative session, the legislature, specifically Representative Nicole Macri, championed a budget, money in the budget for these stipends. This is a first step in recognizing that homeless service workers, frontline staff that do essential work need the wages to be increased. And not having this particular money that was being used was one-time federal American Rescue Plan Act money. So not a funding source that could fund an ongoing increase of wages, but this will be a 1 or 2 time, and I'll let Melody talk about that, up to $2,000 each time stipend for frontline workers to talk about, I'm stumbling over my words this morning, good grief, to access. So we will get some details. BDS is one of the contractors that's been contracted through the Department of Commerce to administer these particular funds. And here at the coalition, this is something that we put a lot of focus on in our advocacy as a first step in, recognizing essential work of this sector. So I will turn it over to Melody to give you the details on who is eligible, how to access them, when they will be available, and all the details that I know you are all anxious to hear about.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Sarah, for that intro. Really great to be here. Hi, everyone. Melody Garcia. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Community Health and Safety Lead at BDS Planning. And as Sarah said, we are actually a sub-consultant for this project for administering the homeless service provider stipends. The main contractor and administrator of the actual, so the cutting of checks and the back-end verification is going to be done through a company called Live Stories, and many of you may recognize that name. They have administered a lot of grants and housing program dollars within the state, and so they'll be doing the bulk of that for this project as well. And what BDS Planning is doing is, since we have good relationships and are pretty well connected to the homeless service provider population, we're doing the outreach, the engagement, trying to get as many people as possible to apply for the stipend and to get their money, because we recognize, that this is a really important sector of work. Being a homeless service provider myself previously, have experience in this realm, and really want to see you all and the rest of our folks get paid. We are also, BDS Planning is also currently doing a homeless service provider trauma study and workforce needs assessment that will sort of go along with this to really help the state come up with interventions to support the workforce, including compensation and resources for self-care, etc. and part of that is this stipend project. So essentially, homeless service providers who are who work directly on site in homeless service provision or as a part of permanent supportive housing programs as defined in the RCW are eligible to apply for this stipend. I'm going to share my screen briefly to show you all the website that we have launched. It's more of a landing page currently, but once the application is open for homeless service providers, it will include a direct link to the application itself, which is meant to be, excuse me, relatively low barrier, and should be easy to access. So here's the website. Can you all see that? Great. So economic relief for homeless service workers. If you're a homeless service worker in Washington State, you may be eligible to receive a stipend of up to $4,000. And these are actually going to be two separate stipends of up to $2,000 each. And so individuals who work at what we are calling an eligible entity. So we go to who can apply. Individuals are eligible for the stipend if they meet all of the following requirements. You're a homeless service worker, working either full-time, part-time, or contracted, directly on site with persons experiencing homelessness or residents of transitional or permanent supportive housing. Currently work for an eligible entity, which is an organization that contracts with a Washington State city or county to provide homeless services as defined in that RCW. And we are excuse me, internally still generating that full list of eligible entities. And there will be a process if folks do not see their organization on this eligible entity list and believe that they are eligible based on this definition, are encouraged to reach out to me or Live Stories, and there will be many options for support and such. And our list should be coming soon. We'll have our first finalized version on Friday, but again, this list will be updated as we gain new information from the field. Currently working in Washington State. So for folks who perhaps work in Bellingham, but live elsewhere, or for folks who are on the east side who work in Washington, but maybe live in Idaho, will still be eligible. And then this piece about having an immediate economic need is also part of the eligibility based on the federal contract. So what this means is that individuals who apply for the stipends will basically self-attest that there's an immediate economic need. And I would argue that anyone working in homelessness services, there's just an immediate economic need because the field is underpaid and inflation, all the things. And so basically it's just a checkbox that folks will self-attest that there's an economic need, and they can ask for up to $2,000 twice within a 6-month period. And the last eligibility criteria is that the income is at or below 80% of county area median income in the county you live in. And so what this means is and we're still getting part of this verified in terms of exactly how this will look. But folks who are at 80% of AMI in their county are eligible, and the household AMI will be calculated on the back end, so folks don't have to do that on the front end. And as far as the application process itself, folks will only have to upload a pay stub from their organization to confirm eligibility. And then again, self-attesting that their income is at or below 80% AMI. So we're hoping that that anyone and everyone apply for these stipends to get their money, and to also make the case if your entity is not on our eligible entities list, because I think that sets a really good precedent for how these things roll out going forward, and to bring visibility to the field as well. So stop sharing. The application will open September 29th. And we plan to really do a lot of promotions, marketing, engagements with folks to ensure that people know that this is coming, that they know that they can apply, and to apply 6 months later for their second stipend as well. So in order for someone to be eligible for both stipends, they have to, the first stipend, they just have to work at an eligible entity, which will be verified through that pay stub that they upload into the application system. And then for the second stipend, if they're at the same or eligible organization 6 months later, then they are able to apply for the second stipend. And again, we're trying to make the whole application process as easy as possible, as low barrier as possible. And so the second stipend application will likely just be a resubmittal of the first with an updated pay stub. So I'm hoping that is somewhat clear. Again, I know that there's still some details we are working out on the back end, and I'm happy to share updates as those happen, and fully plan on engaging the coalition and members in soliciting folks to apply for this once it is open, and to provide support where necessary. I think that's kind of all I have. Brief overview, and then happy to take questions. I see there's some in the chat. At this time, do you have a timeline from when an individual applies to when that stipend is dispersed? That's a great question. Live Stories is committed to cutting payments, I believe, weekly. And it will probably take about 4 weeks to go from application submission to approval to then checks being cut. So it should be a relatively quick turnaround. It's not going to be like 4 months. We're hoping it'll be less than 6 weeks. Are state contracted direct service providers eligible? Yes. Many of them, yes. What happens if you move to another eligible org within that 6 months? That's a good question. It's my understanding that is still that folks are still eligible for the second stipend, but I will have to double check with Commerce on that. That's a great question. We represent workers at Lehigh. Do they have to apply to get these stipends, or can Lehigh apply for their workers? That's interesting. So how we originally kind of planned this outreach was that we would have kind of certain points of contact at each of these eligible entities. And whether that's an HR person or an ED or someone who manages people, that can essentially give us an idea of how many folks they're expecting from within the organization to be eligible to apply. And then folks will have to apply individually. But I think there is precedent, I think, for organizations applying on behalf of individuals. I would just have to double check with Live Stories that is a feasible thing that they can sort of facilitate, because all of this application engineering design happens before launch. And so if there's an easy way for an organization to say, here's all my folks, here are all their pay stubs, can verify AMI, that might be something for us to think about. But as of right now, it's intended for individuals to apply.
And
Thanks,
Melody, I
Go
can
for it.
answer the question around if you move to a different eligible organization. So you would not be eligible. The budget proviso specifically states that to get the second stipend, you have to be employed at the same eligible entity.
Thank you.
And then John, I know you've got stuff in the chat, but your hand is raised. So you wanted to take the floor and ask your questions. You've got good questions in there. You're on mute, John.
Don't I know it? Hi, everybody. Hi, Melody. Couple of questions. So our organization is active in 6 different counties, but when we went to the eligibility list, we're listed, but only for 1 county. Do we need to get that corrected, or is that just not something to be worried about?
That's not something to be worried about. We're aware that, organizations have presence across many different counties. And
Got
so
it.
as
Great.
long as the pay stub or whatever shows the name of the eligible
Got it.
entity, you're fine.
Thank you. And then as a permanent supportive housing providers, I just wanted to confirm that all of the on-site staff are eligible, the property managers, the janitors, the folks that operate the site are eligible for the stipend. They work on site.
They are not.
They are not. That's pretty big. Those are some of the lower paid workers.
Agreed.
Melody, are you sure? I think the website actually says, I think it includes,
The website says anyone who's on site.
And just to add to that, sorry, this is Esther at Broadview. I really appreciate you bringing that question up, John. So just thinking about the janitors and maintenance staff who work on our site, they come into contact with folks who are decompensating frequently. They're not just going into units once they've been cleared out. They're going into units where folks are still currently living to work on maintenance issues. And sometimes they've been verbally harassed, or they come in contact with health related concerns, the potential for bed bugs, the potential for communicable diseases, the potential for accidental pokes or sticks, so they are in a higher level of risk, than one might think when they first think janitor.
so the FAQ on the website specifically states maintenance and custodial staff and reception and administrative support staff, with the exception of executive and senior administrative employees.
So they are eligible.
That's
Okay, I'm sorry.
yeah.
That was a misunderstanding on my part. You were talking about for people who work on site at permanent supportive housing.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So yes, that should be, the FAQ on the website should be correct. I'm going to double check with Kathy at Commerce. She's our contact, because this has come up several times. And I also just want to acknowledge, I fully agree that all folks in this realm should be should be eligible for these. We BDS and Live Stories are not determining who is eligible. Commerce is, and they're working closely with Representative Nicole Macri to help decide exactly what those are. So as I said, like these things are a bit fluid until September 29th when the application goes live. So
yeah, Mel, I think we all appreciate that and understand that this is a very new program and we're all trying to figure it out. I think that as we're getting familiar with the program and as Commerce is making these decisions, it's very helpful if all of us can kind of speak in one voice and really make it clear that the operations folks that work on site are a crucial component to making sure that our clients can be served, whether it's janitors, property managers, or whatever. So yeah, that sounds good. I hate to keep eating up more time. I do have another question.
Well, John, we have other folks that got questions and we are kind of getting short on time. So
I'll put it in the chat. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll wrap back up to it. So, Michael is asking, can I preemptively advocate for my agency to be eligible, or do I have to wait to see? And I think there was another comment about mutual aids. And I thought I heard you say, Melody, that like, you know, there's a process for that and to kind of, maybe that's the way to utilize it.
Yeah, so there will be a process outlined for some of these organizations. I personally am happy to be the conduit for any folks who want to say, is my organization eligible? If no, why not? And then to help you all advocate for that for your org to be added to our list. I have a preemptive list, so I'm happy to connect with folks offline to let you know kind of where things are situated.
Thanks for that. Would you be able to throw the contact that you prefer for folks to inquire about that into the chat? And I was also thinking that kind of to you and Sarah, maybe we can find time after this and sort of collect all the stuff that's coming in through the chat and round back up for folks. So it's kind of all in one place because clearly people have got stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, I can also be a resource around that too, if folks need that information also.
Great.
I've been working on getting some additional organizations added.
Yeah, I know you've been working hard at this behind the scenes, Sarah, so thank you. Do workers have to apply 2 separate times for the stipends, or will initial application approval generate the second stipend automatically?
So good question. As of right now, our process is going to be that folks will have to apply twice, basically to just confirm that they're still at the eligible entity, and the second application will likely just look like a re-upload of a more recent pay stub, but then all of the other information will be saved, and so it should just be an easy submittal. And but we are anticipating folks having to do this twice.
Great, thank you. All right, and I think most other stuff that was being thrown into the chat was getting answered in the chat. So we've got Melody's email address in there. We've got the, you know, sort of the language from Sarah within the FAQ, the website. Belle, I see your hand, and then John, if you want to throw your hand back up and we'll go to you next because I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. So Belle, take the floor.
Yeah, I put in a comment about what about the volunteers? They're still working. They're out there on the front lines. They're doing the work and not getting paid for it. That creates a whole new area of desperation. What about them? Where do they turn?
It's a great question. And as of now, the language in the legislation dictates that they have to be employed through an eligible entity.
I can see a lot of volunteers that may want to walk away because they're being disrespected. They're working their asses off. They're being slaved out in chains for you guys, and they're being discredited in Congress. And they're working for nothing, and they got more to lose because they get less.
Absolutely. And I fully agree. I think there may be some ways to work around that, i.e. if, and we're still working on this on the back end, so don't quote me, but
Yeah.
I'm hoping that organizations can be somewhat flexible in and creative in how they're advocating for the folks that work or volunteer with them. And if it's creating a pay stub that shows you worked 12 hours this month as a volunteer and your pay is $0, that's still a pay stub.
Then I think they should be acceptable. You have, because if it's not in your bylaws, they're gonna, volunteered, and they're gonna push it off the side, sweep it under the rug. And those people that work their asses off all their lives for a company are going to get screwed.
Agreed.
They need the money too, you know?
Agreed.
Thanks, Melody. I appreciate that, sharing a little bit about the conversations y'all are having on the back end.
Yeah, we're having a lot of these conversations on the back end in constant communication with Commerce and Representative Macri. We have a lot of folks with a lot of concerns about who's eligible and why. And, as an advocate myself, I am more than happy to make the case for any and all of you who feel, you're being left out. And someone said something about mutual aid earlier. Those are groups that are really doing a lot of work as well, and not being included in some of this work because they're, not all of them have contracts with the county or with the state. So we're really trying to think about how we can expand this definition. It's really just going to take like some unified voices pushing up against Commerce.
Yeah, thanks, Melody. John, and then Mallory.
Thank you. So Melody, you may not have to answer this question. It's like super technical, but is there like a definition of what Commerce is counting as permanent supportive housing? So for example, like our organization has many different types of properties. We kind of span the gamut of, workforce housing to permanent supportive housing. And we have properties that are kind of somewhere in between. They like serve 60% workforce and 40% of the building is set aside for homeless folks. Do you have a sense, like, is it kind of like a pretty open or aperture in terms of how we're defining that? Or is there a threshold where, we've got one homeless person living in the building and that's not going to qualify? Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And that's a really good point. I think as of now, it's supposed to be a relatively loose definition, though there is the RCW that Commerce is going to continually point back to, and I will post that in the chat. RCW 43-185C-010. So homeless housing program as defined in this RCW, but it's a good point that facilities hold different programs, and it's our understanding that anyone who works for the eligible entity that is providing that on-site direct support is eligible. And so in thinking about how that plays out in some of these permanent supportive housing kind of truncated programs, I don't know that I have a fully concrete answer, but I will add that to my list of things to bring up with Commerce.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mallory.
Thank you. Melody, this is really exciting. Thank you so much for this overview. And I think you've already had some really great questions and comments. I have one more comment. I'm just thinking about, you mentioned folks who live potentially out of the state or in a different area. I guess there's like a level of concern that comes up for me when we think about basing eligibility where you work on a certain county and then residence on the AMI level of the county that you reside in. Because I just think about how many people are not King County residents,
they're out, you know, they're in peers, potentially in Kitsap. There's such a big swing between AMI levels. And I know that this is obviously a statewide program, so I think there's implications for other pockets of the state as well. So just another thought that came up in conversation with Commerce, if there's a potential avenue to explore basing AMI on the county that you actually work in, since a lot of folks are facing very long commutes to afford a place to live that is much further away from their workplace.
It is based on the AMI that of the county where you live.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So for instance, we've got a lot of folks that live in Pierce County, Snohomish County, Kitsap County, but work in King. So their eligibility of their employment would be based on, you know, the King County entity, but their AMI would be calculated on the Pierce, Snohomish, or Kitsap, which is a significant swing. Snohomish, not so much, but Pierce. So I'm just thinking about that because there's a different AMI level for your county, right? So if it's based on where you live and you live there just because that's where you can afford to live, but you still have a long ferry ride or a really long commute to get in to, you know, make really meager wages, just get, I don't know, there might not be nothing there. I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And it is something we've talked about. I think I think as of now, it's still going to be based on where someone lives. And I don't know that I have a good kind of technical answer for why that is, but I'm happy to follow up.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything else coming in through the chat. Comment, just also advocating for what Mallory was stating of being based on where they work. I'm not seeing any other hands. I will just say I super appreciate, Melody, you being here and fielding some really important and challenging questions.
Yes.
And into the weeds. And I super appreciate your commitment to, like, you know, you and Sarah both to for us to connect and be resources to continue having this conversation, to continue to raise these really important points that are being made, and just who all is showing up and doing this work and how people are being valued or not across the board. And, you know, I think what reflects the patchwork of how this community comes together to try to help people, and really important. What I will say is I think this is super key to the campaign that the coalition is starting to kick off, which is that essential workers. And I'm going to pass it over to Sarah to talk about this a little bit more, but I know we're pushing on time, and I just really invite folks to opt in to continue these types of conversations with the coalition so that we can continue to help raise these issues up. So Melody, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. Sarah, I'll turn it over to you for any final thoughts on anything you want to add into stipend talk, and then move us on to essential workers.
Yeah, I think, Melody, thank you so much. That was great. It is a lot of information. We will be sending out additional information after this, and we will be sending updates as we have all of the details coming from BDS and Commerce. If people have specific questions, I am also happy to field what I know and help folks through that. Yeah, and thanks again. We're running out of time, so I just really want to quickly connect this to our larger campaign around essential workers. We kicked this off last month, I believe, with an event with Representative Jayapal, bringing attention to essential workers and the need for increased funding levels at the federal level to support our homeless and housing contracts here with the federal funds that we receive. Jody just put in the chat a link where you can sign up to get regular updates from us around essential workers. The next sort of big projects and campaigns that we are working on around this will be the city and county budgets, trying to get inflation increases and increases to wages in both of those budgets. And then sort of on the tail of that, but also intertwined with both of those, are the two big levies that will be up for renewal in 2023, the Seattle Housing Levy and the Vet Senior Human Service Levy, ensuring that there is language and provisions in both of those levies to ensure wage increases and inflation increases for homeless worker and human service contracts. So if you want to be involved in any of that advocacy, if we can call on you for your specific expertise in what this looks like from the direct service provider level, from the, the homeless service provider level, please use that link that Jody dropped in the chat and give us your contact information, and we will keep you looped in. And I will turn it over. Is Allison back with the last piece around our action alert today?
I don't know if I'm seeing her.
Oh, okay.
On.
Okay, she actually, now that I look at the time, she might be hopping over to the King County Regional Homelessness Authority Governing Board meeting. So we will send out the action alert with our follow-up message to this around the parks proposals from Seattle City Council. I'll hand it back to Jody.
All right. Well, that brings us pretty much to time. I have failed you all once again in my agenda and time management for member announcements. I encourage you to continue to hold me accountable for that. I'm clearly failing myself on that regard too. We'll hang on for a little bit if there is a quick announcement, something that you want to share in terms of program changes, program updates, timely information that's coming down the pike that everyone could know about. Also feel free to drop that in the chat. We do save that. We do try to incorporate that into our follow-up blog so we can share that out with everybody. And we've got some information around Best Starts for Kids. They've got some new childcare subsidies. We'll share all that information and their information sessions out with folks. But on that note, I will take a minute, and if there's anybody that wants to share anything, please take the floor. Okay, well, have a lovely day to all of you. Lovely rest of this week. Please reach out to myself, Allison, Sarah. If you've got more questions around the homeless provider stipends that we need to be raising up, please opt in for that essential work campaign that we are going to be doing a lot of work around, because obviously this is a hardworking group of folks, and you represent a hardworking group of folks and community that's wide ranging, and we need to raise up that good work you all do. So have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. And we'll see you the next time.
Don't forget
I've-
about RAP. They work with them, the homeless.
The who, Belle?
RAP Regional Action Program.
Oh, yes.
I work with them as a volunteer. I'm out there dealing with homeless people, getting them involved with RAP. You know, that's all volunteer work.
It is. It
It'd
is.
be
Yeah.
nice to have a stipend for them too, because we're right out there. We've got to deal with COVID. We've got to deal with monkeypox. We're directly involved.
Yeah. The work you all do at RAP is huge and very important, along with other mutual aids. I think you were the one that threw in mutual aids. RAP is a good partner of the coalition. So we absolutely encourage RAP to join into this
Can you send
campaign
them
with
shout out?
us.
Because we work out there with them. We put together community events, not only online, but out in the public. You know, we go to schools, we travel on the trains, we travel on, you know, we're out there. We're frontliners.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why should we be excluded? Somebody needs to think about us.
Well, I think we've got a good conversation started, and we've got a really good advocate in Melody as part of this work. Sarah has also been working tirelessly behind the
Mm.
scenes. She barely acknowledged all the work
Sweet.
she's doing, so we can
Sweet.
continue to forward this. So
Hey, you got
Thank
Mr.
you.
B out there. He's directly there. You know, he's a church guy and he's out there walking along the streets, you know, bringing people in and doing things for him.
yeah,
He's a front runner.
perfect. Well, Belle, I'm going to throw mine and email into the chat so you've got it directly, and we can continue to have this conversation.
Wait,
I always talk and then can't type, but there it is. Please reach out. We can
email
continue
me.
this.
Just email me. You should have it.
I will look for it. If it's in with the registration, we'll have it.
Yeah, it's in with the registration. You sent me the link to this
Wonderful.
because I don't got time to write all of that.
I'll reach out for sure.
Okay,
All right. Take care, folks. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
bye.